in America? Like, how much of a problem is it? Like,
It's
obviously, you
not
can be like
much of a
standard
problem.
deviation. Yeah, I don't imagine it would affect actual results. Then is it worth even investing in trying to eliminate sneaky Javier from Guatemala sneaking in and being Democrat?
It's virtually not a thing.
Yeah. I don't think that anyone is. I could be wrong about this. This is just pure speculation, but I don't think that anyone is really making a concerted effort to scrutinize that. I think that yeah.
Like, literally, the majority of voter fraud is not the ID type of voter fraud. It's like stuff that was mentioned before, like
type of stuff.
Yeah, like mail-in. It's that sort of control and like people messing with things within like the polls and within the booths and the guys who were counting it and things like that.
Yeah,
that would be where you want to keep your checks and balances.
Yeah, and then when the votes get contested, people say, of course you would say that. And it's kind of sort of brushed off. I don't think there's an organization. I don't think anyone is really scrutinizing and sort of assessing how much fraud is present in elections. I don't think so. That's just my, opinion.
Yeah, especially the Democrats aren't doing that.
No.
And what happens when you get the same results after the Republicans do the recounts? What's the argument for that?
Tampering.
The Republicans tampered this time?
Nope, the Democrats.
How?
Could be wrong on this, but
recounted.
I don't know about evidence for recaps, but I'm pretty sure there was like a lot of like, at least like the election, the like digitized machines. There was like a lot of like unauthorized connections to those machines. I don't know about voting counts, so I'm not going to say any claim that it was rigged, but there was a lot of unauthorized connections.
But you're convinced, so you have a belief that happened.
I think America's
not convinced. I'm just saying that definitely could have been the case. Like, I could show you a bunch of videos of people like throwing out certain ballots. That is very.
Those videos are hilarious.
Let's take the Trump-Biden thing. So he contested a couple of states, and they did a recount and concluded that there was not enough votes to for him to swing the states anyway.
Yeah.
But and that was sort of the end of it. The particular states that he contested, they did the recount, concluded that there wasn't enough votes for him to swing the states, and so that was the end of it. But in sort of like a court of law, wouldn't the presence of fraudulent ballots and wouldn't that be enough to open an investigation into all the states? But of course, no one's going to do that, right? And so you never know. Like maybe those particular states that were scrutinized weren't enough to swing the vote for him, but maybe like on aggregate, had you opened investigations into all the states, maybe on aggregate it would have made a difference. I don't know, but like that's borderline conspiracy theory talk, But
you guys must vote an awful lot. You have to vote for the president. You have to vote for like your state's person. You have to vote for your local council people. How much do you guys like? How many times a year are you guys voting?
Aquinas, dude, that's actually a much bigger problem because nobody gives two shits about their local elections, and I think that is what's led to like how big of a problem we have. Like, people expected Biden to fix police racism. Biden has nothing to do with the police in America. Literally nothing.
Well,
it's all
when you say
stuff.
Biden barely.
When you say though that he does, but it's on a whole different level. Like it's different from the community.
No, zero impact
from Biden.
Yeah, I suppose zero because the president. Yeah, but it's definitely like a thing where I think people have given up on small local government.
Yeah, because it's not sexy to tweet about. That's why.
All right,
it's not.
Okay.
Well, I don't tweet shit, but like I still think it's kind of because they don't have any money. Like my city where I live in California doesn't have any money. Like, and yet it's still kind of like a well-to-do. Like, it's just always very unclear like how much money is even there.
All right, so I'm gonna take the bait. You threw it out there. Is police racism a thing?
Oh no, I just meant police over excessive force in general, nothing to do with race.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I'm sure there's definitely some racist
I could definitely
cops.
concede to that. Yeah, for sure. I could concede to that too.
Like,
police should be judged individually. Also,
no,
I agree with that.
All cops are bastards. Strong atheist.
Well, that's sweet, Strong. That's so sweet of you to say that.
Underpaid bastards. I still rely on the cops to keep my wife safe when she walks home from work at night. You know,
cops are just as much of the working class as any other member of the military.
If I could answer Nas real quick, I just want to let you know we don't do like a separate ballot for every little election. We usually cluster them together, so you get like one ballot in a year, and the big ones happen once every 4 years.
And I just want to like add on to that whoever said it earlier was right. People tend to, unless you're politically active, most people don't care about the local elections. It's only the people locally that are politically active.
Yeah, and then they complain about their property tax and their schools. Like,
yeah.
Well, but there are bigger issues that relate that trickle down. But I agree that you should start with local. I feel like it's such a crapshoot, and I feel like I don't live in a particularly poor. Well, it depends what you feel about California, but I just feel like nothing really gets done locally.
That's why a lot of people are moving out of California.
California,
everybody hates us now, like the cockroaches that we are.
Isn't Austin becoming like the most newly popular? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of people moving.
San Antonio.
Yeah, Austin is like a technology hub now. It's becoming one, so that's why it's attracting a lot of people. Plus, the taxes. So.
Problem is California's way too liberal.
yeah, that's it.
It's not though. We got a huge Republican county here. Like they're everywhere.
What's it called? I spent a lot of time in California.
I don't want to dox anyone myself, really, but I mean the whole Inland Empire is bro country. I don't live exactly there, but I live kind of next to it. they're all over the place, and I mean, granted, it's still a blue state, but like, I don't know, man. The whole voting system is just really confusing and messed up.
There's a topic that's been lingering over our heads forever. I don't know if I should drop it or not.
Drop it.
Abortion.
Mandatory vaccines.
Oh shit!
Oh wow, yeah.
There already are mandatory, pretty much.
I feel like in a week it's going to be for my county too.
Can't force someone to get a shot. The shot doesn't even make you immune or anything like that.
It's not how it works.
You can't force anyone to take it.
About herd immunity. It's about trying to prevent the incubation of current known strains so that they don't mutate and create other strains that then we won't be resistant against.
You're going to force someone to put an injection in their body?
I don't know. I'm not necessarily. Hold on, wait. That wasn't my position. I'm just saying that they're important, but they're not. I'm saying that they're not like 100%. It's not. It's never been about that. But the herd immunity is what's key.
The thing, I hear a lot of people argue, debate. I pay attention to a lot of debates about the vaccine mandate, and the people that are for it and against it, and the people that are against it always feel it necessary to throw up these caveats. But to me, it's a lot simpler. You shouldn't force people to undergo a medical procedure, right? And if we
putting a Band-Aid on a medical procedure, because we're not talking too far removed from that. I mean, it's like, bam, and you're done.
Let's say.
Oh wait,
wow.
Let's say that's
no
true,
way you hold that position.
But it's not. This isn't a science. In fact, it is a science. It's not.
Let's say that what you're saying is accurate. Should you be able to force someone to put a Band-Aid on?
What? No, my point was just to say that it's not as though it's some completely flighty, no one knows what's going on. Now, granted, with this vaccine, that's a little bit more, but that's still more or less, it's the same idea. That's been a tried and true method.
No, but there are actually serious concerns with, like, side effects. That actually is the case.
What if I just don't want to right? Like, let's not get into the efficacy, right? What if I just don't wanna, and I don't owe you an explanation, right? Yeah.
Well,
okay.
in a way, it's like the freedom to swing my fist ends at your nose, right? So I affect the space around me, which includes you. And I don't know legally, like, what should be allowed or not allowed, but I do know that, like, you know, like, say that there's an outbreak of something, like, the government steps in, the CDC is supposed to step in, and, like, there are procedures and laws that we follow because we're talking about eliminating the spread of a disease. As far as, you know, if we should make you, that's kind of hard. I mean, like, physically force you, I don't know. But
that's what we're talking about. That's what the mandates are meant to do, to force you.
Should other people have to be forced into being put in danger? Because there are people that are immunocompromised and you don't know who they are. To the extent that you would cause unnecessary harm, I don't know. I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate here because I don't know. That is a tricky subject. But like, is it fair? Because I would argue that if it's not fair to be forced into a medical procedure, it's also not fair to be forced to be put into harm's way like that.
Who?
What if that medical procedure could kill you?
Wait. But what if you're vaccinated though? So you're vaccinated. I'm not. Right. And so you're saying, but us sharing space is still a problem, but you're vaccinated.
That's not how the vaccine works, and I'm not an expert here, but the idea is it would be putting people at risk who either just can't take the vaccine or people that have taken the vaccine but are still susceptible. People aren't all the same. They have different ailments that you don't even know about necessarily. And the vaccine is never meant to be 100%, particularly because, again, as I said at the beginning, when these strains can incubate and then mutate, and then there are different strains that the vaccine doesn't account for, then it's all fucked, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's why it's important to have everybody do it. It's not merely because of the one-to-one you and I are sharing a room. It's a bigger picture than that.
Okay.
I see what you're saying, but
I'm going with that. So, but the vaccine only lessens like my chance of getting COVID, right? So,
no, it does not. It does not. It only, if you get it, should get it to a lesser extent. That's what it does.
Okay, so right, but it only my point is
I
that it only affects
me.
We can still spread it, right? I'm asking. We can still spread it.
I mean, the virus will still enter your body, sure, but like it's, I mean, it's not going to be blocked from entering your body. But like, will your body have that same kind of adverse reaction? It's a higher likelihood that it won't. Or yes, I guess reduce symptoms, but I feel like that was always the case because everybody's immune system is different.
Right, but you still could be a carrier. You're still going to give it to somebody else.
Yeah,
you can't force somebody to get a shot. It's just not going to happen. And if you made a law like that,
well, I don't see why not though.
You're not going to be able to enforce it. Listen, a law is only as good as is able to be enforced. You cannot make
just to be clear, Strong. Are you now separating the idea of what's practically likely going to be feasible versus like, are you saying like we shouldn't even try because it's because I feel like if something is maybe not going to work out that well, doesn't mean that we shouldn't, right?
I'm saying like, you can't force someone to get a shot. If you made the law, people are going to refuse to get a shot.
Can I respond to?
I would agree that reaction would likely exist.
I have a question.
Hold on.
Should people sacrifice their religious beliefs for that? Because, like, of course, the vaccine was made with like aborted fetal cells, or at least research for it was.
It wasn't. It actually wasn't. This one wasn't.
It wasn't.
I don't want to touch that.
It was made with chicken eggs.
Can I respond to an earlier claim that was made about transmission rate? Just to be very clear about this. So being vaccinated.
Yeah, go for it.
It definitely does reduce. I think it's like 63% transmissibility rate if you're vaccinated. So in general, if you're vaccinated, you have a lower chance of transmitting the virus if you catch it.
I remember reading the opposite on the CDC. Like I'm pretty sure I read the opposite.
I just read this. It was October 23rd. This was posted.
Oh, okay. That's fair. I read that months and months ago.
But I'm interested in the should we or shouldn't we conversation that we were having. I get strong atheists. I get that, you know, it's it's likely not going to be enforceable. I'm with you on that. But let's just talk about the should we, shouldn't we, the ought we, or oughtn't we, or I don't know if that's a word or not.
I think that's going to hinge on whether or not you think the thing even works, though, right? And then it becomes a bunch of moral questions after that.
Well, actually,
yeah, that's kind of how it went. I mean, it doesn't have to go that way, but yeah, isn't that curious how that's exactly the pattern that it took?
I'm pretty sure it's unprecedented. Has there ever been a case where someone had to get a shot?
I think I've heard people talk about the smallpox.
I think flu behavior was similar.
And I think if people genuinely knew that it was a necessary thing, they would volunteer to get it. The problem is they don't know that. So the way to handle it is to handle it with politics. Express what the case is and get people to take the shots that way if they can. I mean, I was right on the. I canceled my first shot.
Sounds awful.
I chickened out.
You're saying politics instead of education?
Well, that's what
Absolutely.
I mean. Education as through politics. That's what I meant. Absolutely.
And now we go back to like the media though, and like whether or not certain demographics of people trust certain institutions. I have a really good question for you guys that I'm curious about. Is it ever okay? I'm trying to think. Okay for an institution to deliberately lie or maybe even just withhold information from the public for public safety?
Yeah, I think so.
Public safety.
All right. Hold on. There's a follow-up. If your answer is yes, do I now have a reason not to trust that institution?
You've heard me comment on this before, so I brought up the concept of an information hazard. And there are situations where by presenting information to a group of people, it can create more harm than good. I think it just depends on the topic. I think it's contextual.
I agree, but the question is, does it justifiably deteriorate trust?
Yes, I would say so.
I remember.
There you go.
There was the whole face mask thing, and they said, "Oh, face masks don't prevent it." And they did that to stop people buying face masks. They wanted to.
I'm sorry, you can't say that like this whole group of people over here is a bunch of retards because they're not getting what the institutions are telling them to do when.
Oh, no, you're right. I mean, there's a huge disconnect between the average Joe and the scientific or otherwise intellectual enterprise. Like, there's always going to be a huge chasm of difference because, Joe Bob goes to work to pay the bills and doesn't necessarily even have the mental energy to, like, consider these other things.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that one. I've heard that in the media, too. Everyone that's not getting vaccinated is not dumb or less intelligent or not plugged into the scientific community. Some people just don't wanna, right? Like,
well, that's another piece of the pie, sure, but like, I don't see how that is mutually exclusive.
They're not even considered people on like Twitter. I mean, I'm serious. People who aren't vaccinated in certain social media groups.
Because certain ideas have more momentum behind them and appeal to, guess who? Young people. Young people rule the freaking world, and they are given a voice, even if they don't know what the heck they're talking about. And that's not at me, a bitter old man, or anything. It's just that like they're the biggest profit center,
Yeah.
So they get a bigger say.
I hope this conversation finds its way to using businesses to threaten the livelihood of people who don't get vaccinated. I hope we get there.
But Lawson, I wanted to add on to something. So it was responding to the last question. Does it justifiably deteriorate trust? I think there's a bit of directionality there. If the trust was violated in such a way that it was to the benefit of society, then it would deteriorate trust in a way where you can't necessarily listen to what's being said, but the intention may be for the benefit of the people, right?
But
so there's a directionality there. Or if it's vice versa, if it's not to the benefit of the people, then it's just a complete, justified deterioration of trust. But I think there are directions to that. I think it comes back to circumstances mattering more with these kinds of concepts.
I agree, but the only way for me to know or like tell if it was for my benefit is again from the institution itself.
Well, it's outcomes, like based off of what they've done, the results of what they've done.
Yeah, or if we have access to like independent studies, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah,
but that isn't always the case. When there's like with schools, there's all this prestige wrapped up in it. And I understand like the revulsion against this supposed liberal bias, which doesn't actually exist, by the way, never has, never will, because it's just certain ideas are more popular, and also the facts of reality say that certain ideas that like stand upon their own merit are going to be more favorable, right? At least, especially in a place of education where they are even kind of removed, in a sense, partitioned from the rest of society because it's about, intellectual pursuits. And so they're not necessarily thinking about everything else pragmatically.
Well, critical race theory does not have liberal bias and is based on merit.
It's not about like a political bias as much as it is just that certain ideas appeal to certain people. Like if I was
liberal.
Okay, can you actually rephrase your question?
Yeah, like professors at colleges, they're so liberal, they're indoctrinating the college students to be liberal.
You don't have any evidence for that. That's just this general conception that you have. And I want to be sympathetic, but like,
no. Let me respond. I'm a high school student. I'm a high school student. Let me tell you something. I take AP literature, and our teacher makes us read books through 12 different lenses. One of them's indigenous people's lens, LGBTQ lens, a critical race theory lens.
Facile argument. This is just because schools want to get funding, so they're going to do the popular thing. It's just like how a TV show, hold on, let me answer this, because this is about ratings. It's the same argument. Like, why does a particular news station report certain things over other things? It's because they want ratings.
Oh, so it's not about merit now. So it's not about merit.
I'm saying that. Hold on. I said two separate things. I spoke to popularity, and I also spoke to when ideas stand upon their own merit. Both of those things are going on. Now, again, these are called the facts of reality.
It's about,
and if certain ideas are popular, you cannot suggest conspiracy unless you can demonstrate it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, there's critical race theory, the theory, and then there's the practice of implementing critical race theory. So teaching kids about whiteness and power dynamics, that's the practice of teaching critical race theory. You might not be teaching the students the theory per se, but you're doing the work based off the tenets of the theory. So you are in practicing critical race theory. And that's what people mean.
That's bullshit. That's bullshit.
Can I have a question for you?
It's literally the same thing I've been repeating. It is a combination. Well, in this case, I would say that, look, what's sufficient to say is a more likely explanation, because we see it everywhere else, is that certain ideas, people are going to gravitate toward them because they're more popular, and or like in the case with schools, like they could get more funding if they teach certain ideas.
Exactly.
It's not a liberal bias, though. You're confusing what's popular for what's.
Wait. I'm sorry.
People gravitate towards their biased feelings about it.
No. Can I please ask? So we should start teaching kids not the truth, not actual merits, but based on whatever gets schools funding. Is that what we should start teaching?
No, look, I don't. It's a bad thing, to be clear. It's a very bad thing. It's just people will sometimes look at this and then suggest that it's a liberal conspiracy when there's never been and never will be evidence for that, because it is an utterly and fantastically conspiracy-minded way to think.
Let's say
no, because you're generalizing. Like, what does it even mean to have a liberal bias? Like, it's a nuance of different positions.
I'm going to explain.
It's a nuance of positions.
Okay. Well,
you have more than one position that can make a person "quote unquote" liberal. Like, where does that begin and end? You don't know. You don't have a way to like.
Most colleges have a liberal bias and produce.
That's again
teacher
evidence.
So you're contesting that colleges are predominantly left-leaning and liberal. Are you contesting that?
If they resemble left-leaning ideas, it has nothing in and of itself to do with the fact that there is a bias, which is a whole separate thing that nobody has demonstrated. Because you understand that to do so, you would have to connect a conspiracy theory to reality.
No.
Because it is absurd. If an idea is popular, it's just the facts of reality.
If they're teaching socially liberal theories way more commonly than socially conservative
because they're popular, because they'll get more funding, because they'll get more students. I mean, this has nothing to do with appealing to a bias.
So wait.
If they're biased toward anything, it's toward whatever's popular. That's not.
Let's say what you're saying is true at the college level. right?
It's like the difference between like a bandwagon liberal versus like an actual progressive liberal, if you would make that distinction.
Kevin, finish.
Hold on, I'm agreeing with you. So let's say at the college level, it's a coincidence. There's this shared interest in these ideas, and so those interests get propagated out into the world when these students become graduates. And I want to specifically focus on the teachers for a moment. So these students become graduates that are teachers, and they go out into the world and continue to propagate these ideas. And so now they end up as full-fledged teachers in institutions with these ideas that they have that they believe in, for lack of a better expression, right? And so now they're in these institutions and they're propagating these ideas. Is that not and let's say that they are effective at propagating these ideas? Is that not like propagating a liberal agenda?
It depends, and does that not on a couple of things? Can I answer? I'll answer you, and I want to be charitable, but I feel like
here's the last point. And does the end result of that not result in a liberal bias in those institutions?
No, and here's again why. I want to be charitable here. I understand, I think, what you're trying to say. For one, I think it should be pointed out that seems kind of like an oversimplification of like that process of going through school, and then what are you saying? Like they come out of that, they propagate the ideas. I mean, that's just what ideas do. I mean, that's what we do with ideas. You haven't demonstrated the bias there. And if we have this wealth of these liberal ideas, they may stand or fall based upon their own merit, irrespective of who's pushing the ideas. Now, granted, when we're talking about like a prestigious, education system that has all this wealth involved, then yeah, you want to be concerned about things like bias. But how do you differentiate between a bias versus I think when an idea can stand on its own merit and people gravitate toward it because it's a good idea, and also there's this idea that there are certain ideas that become popular because imagine like the young student that doesn't really necessarily understand the nuance to the different subjects that they're about to study, but maybe they do have an understanding of like just enough to know that they want to be like. They want to fight for freedoms, and so they're gonna be propped up as like the liberal of all liberals, when in reality they're just a compassionist. Yeah, I really don't understand why you didn't let me finish that point, because that was pretty key. Let me repeat that again.
I will. I promise. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I think I understand.
That's fine. Just because that was kind of key, and I know I took a second to get there, but I have to stress when you say that when you suggest there's a bias, you have a burden of proof to demonstrate something very specifically to tie it together. And nobody has done that because they're shooting from the hip.
I think where we're missing each other is when I don't think that a bias has to be intentional, and it seems to me that you feel that the bias has to be intentional, right? If there is a and maybe I'm misusing bias, right?
It's not necessarily with respect to all biases, but or every sense of the word bias, but as it's being used here. I feel that it is more intentional because it's like there's a cover-up going on. So that's how people like Razor speak, as though there's a cover-up going on.
I would say I could throw a stone. I could point at any like school in America and say it has a English bias, and
there's good reasons for that. Money and the ideas themselves being warranted.
I think he meant language.
Wouldn't you agree?
I'm just saying that there doesn't have to be intentionality behind it, right? It's not that. Yeah, it's just I'm just speaking to the predominance of the thing, right? So if we end up with a school with a predominance of socialist ideas, and let's say that they're there because they're just the most popular ideas, I would say schools have a bias towards socialist ideas. That's how I'm using the word. Is all I'm trying to say.
And that's socialist ideas. Okay, so not just left. We're talking full socialism.
I was just giving an example. I was using that as
okay. Well, I mean, I could agree. It's just I think there are just always going to be better explanations than the conspiracy-minded ones. Which a bias in and of itself isn't to suggest conspiracy. It's just that's often where people have been taking it.
Can I ask a hypothetical? Room. If we're sending a kid to like PragerU, let's say, would we say that they're like? Do you already see where I'm going with this? Like, clearly, PragerU is going to have a bias of like toward like Christianity, right? Or no?
Sort of. I mean, American, American,
sort of.
Fundamentalism.
Also, I posted the political views of American academics in main stage chatter. If anybody wants to see it.
Harlequin, do you think that the media is liberal?
Well, that's media.
Media is a pretty broad. I mean, because there's
mainstream media,
different like
legacy media.
Even still,
look, and do you think
I think that like whether you're getting hits on your website or you're getting people tuning into your news station, like you get ratings, you get hits. These things are how you actually are able to do it to begin with. Like like airtime being as expensive as it's been. I don't know if it's exactly expensive anymore because like we don't just watch stuff on television, but like airtime's expensive, so that you got to have really high ratings, which means you make compromises. You appeal to things that are going to get you views, which often is just trash. It's stuff that's like these mock representations of one group to rile up the other group to get everybody fight. It
just feels like you're being unnecessarily slippery. It either is the case or it is not the case.
No, that's BS because that's how society works. It's either the case or it's not. When the media is not a whole monolithic thing, you can't say it's either the case or it's not.
They're either completely neutral, they're left-leaning, or they're right-leaning.
They're not a monolith. So again, I reject the majority. That. I mean, how is that?
You can speak in generality. We're just having a conversation. Like you're being it's slippery here. Like.
I don't think so. I'm not. I mean, it's called that there are better explanations beyond the conspiracy-minded ones.
I mean, we never even got to the explanation part. We just asked. Somebody just asked if, like what's your view on the leanings of the mainstream media?
Socially, the media.
I don't know that they do lean that way, though. I think so. So you understand? You've asked a loaded question. I don't know that they are leaning that way.
Are left and liberal leaning, but not necessarily. Like,
no, they lean toward popular opinion is not the same as the left. Just because you find a kid with blue hair and he's protesting something, you can't say that's what all liberal ideology is like.
Is liberal.
Ask a question.
Sorry, Harlequin. Popular politics is liberal.
So Harlequin, I got a question.
And who cares either way? Like that doesn't mean that's progressive ideas.
On your points,
does no one watch Bosch? Like, come on.
Points that are taught in school, you mentioned two things about those ideas being popular, and I guess something about merit. So you think that ideas should be taught in school based on popularity?
No. I was just pointing out as far as like why a person. I was just kind of speculating as to like why a person would gravitate toward beliefs, and I would imagine. It's because beliefs are popular, and also because separately from that, there are beliefs that just stand upon their own merit, and that there's at no point. And I pointed that out because, to rebut this idea of like a conspiracy-minded bias. But I understand too that bias doesn't necessarily mean conspiracy. It's just it's often taken that direction in this context.
Do you agree that critical race theory shouldn't be being taught in schools like that? If it's just
if it was so popular, why?
Like what? Like beating people,
protesting it. Why are so many people upset that it exists and is being taught to children? If it's not just a popular idea that across the political, sorry.
Well, yeah, because we have like this whole dynamic of like parent to student, and like the parents know best because there's this idea of like the home. And I would imagine if I had kids, like I would also kind of want to lord over them in some ways. But nevertheless, like people use the excuse that, oh, my child is being put through something, or oh, my loved one is being put through something, so I'm going to take offense to this. But in reality, it's like we're all just sort of like trying to explore the best of what are the best tenable models of reality. We're just trying to learn.
So the kids are supporting it now. They could actually support critical race theory. Is that what you think? Because I can definitely tell you that the kids nor the parents support critical race theory.
Can I ask you a question?
The parents have more.
It's a good idea not to teach something because it's this popular.
Say again.
You think it's a good idea not to teach something because it's this popular, Suave?
I agree. No, I think that would be terrible. I'm not squelching any ideas.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. Is you saying that people don't like this thing?
No, not necessarily. But I was
just speaking if there's a bias.
Because he was regarding like things about how beliefs are generally taught when popular, and so I was pointing out that it's a dispopular thing, so it shouldn't be taught in what he was regarding. I don't think
unpopular beliefs should be regarded. I mean, it's just a fact that among the curriculum, among the beliefs, some are going to be more popular than others, or they're opposite, basically. Like, I mean, that's just the fact. These are the facts of reality, and if you're not going to differentiate between,
let's not ignore the fact that it's being taught as fact. It's not being taught as an alternative.
That depends. I mean, sometimes what catches a news story, it'll be passed off as, this is a fact, but then in reality, we look at like the actual, what actually went down. It's not always the case.
In high school, I can show you.
The thing is,
because frankly, like, only so few things could be said to be facts. You know, like.
Critical theory is a type of skepticism.
Becomes popular, and you think that it should be taught to children.
You do understand
that's no way what I was saying, but it might happen anyway, because that's what I was saying, is that sometimes popular beliefs take off even if they're not legitimate.
Harlequin, hold on a second.
That doesn't imply a bias.
Hold on. Lil Nas, repeat what you said. I think this is important for folks to kind of digest here.
Critical theory as a whole is a type of skepticism. Rejects the concept of facts or objective facts.
What?
Yeah, that's part of what makes it really stupid.
Critical theory as a whole rejects objectivism. This is why you're learning about lenses.
Wait, critical theory or critical race theory?
Objectivism.
Critical theory
is a type of critical theory.
Cool Nas. Does LGBTQ theory also reject objectivism too? And does indigenous theory also reject objectivism?
What's indigenous theory? What's LGBT theory? These are not things.
It's like that something about like analyzing structures through internalized homophobia.
Oh, you're talking
about intersectionality.
Critical theory. So whether it's like radical feminist theory, whether it's like socialist theory, whether it's regardless of what it is, if it's critical, rejects objective facts. That's what makes it critical.
It's not critical. It doesn't have critical in the name, but I can definitely tell you that it's much more socially liberal than Republican.
Why don't any of these lesson plans ever appear online? Like, nobody ever posts a screenshot of this is the paper that the school gave my kid.
Yeah, I have the paper. I have the paper. I have the paper. I can send you pictures.
We need an explanation to tie it.
I would like to hear Harlequin's take on that.
Oh, I have it in my AP binder. They gave us a 60-page binder. They give all the schools of theory. There are absolutely no conservative traditionalist theories. It's all socially liberal theories like feminism. I can literally send you the pictures if you don't believe me. I am not making this up at all. They're all schools of thought that we're taught to read literature under in regards to the lenses.
I mean,
none of them are traditional.
In terms of like serious higher education, and I guess this like bleeds down. And I think it does get really slow. Like trying to teach kids the nuance of critical theory doesn't really work. You can't really do it. So I think that's where it fails, and you get this mixed messaging, which sounds really, really bad.
I have a question real quick here. Harlequin, do you believe anyone? Do you believe anyone at all is biased to the left?
Of course, that's not.
I'm asking Harlequin.
Of course, people are biased to the left.
I'm asking Harlequin.
Of course, people are biased to the left.
I mean, I can speak for myself, but if he wants to jump in too, it's fine. I mean, I feel like that was a kind of a sleazy question. Because why are you only asking that about the left? Like, is there something unique in that regard, or are you asking me on a broader level?
I feel it's very.
Yeah, I can. Do you know how I fought bias? Because when I was growing up,
you won't answer the question.
I'm trying to. Okay, so
Go ahead.
When I was growing up, okay, it would have been very easy for me to just keep on being.
Wait, is this an answer to the question?
This doesn't sound at all relevant.
Jesus.
I could give a shit because it is. So can you bear with me for a second? Because you didn't ask me if I'm biased politically. You asked if I can't or can be biased toward left. So that's just a weirdly shape question, but okay.
I asked if anyone could be biased to the left.
Or anyway, same diff, because you didn't ask if they could be biased toward any other side of the spectrum.
When you try to theorize about where the conversation is meant to go, you're not being honest.
No, I'm saying the question is oddly tipped in one, but it doesn't matter. It's neither here nor there. Fine, I'll just answer your question. I was raised to be a born-again Republican Christian conservative, right? I'm not anymore. But it would have been very easy for me to do that. Can biases exist? Sure, because there was a period of time when I just was parroting everything my folks would say, or parroting everything. Of course, those biases exist. And yes, that would mean left. But, what is left and what isn't left is, you have to get to the specifics, right? Strong. I mean, wouldn't you agree you have to judge the individual and in a similar way you would want to go case by case?
Absolutely. But my point was that yes, they exist, right? So why would you think they couldn't exist in schools? Why would you think they couldn't exist in the media? We know they exist.
Well, I didn't say that, though. So let me clarify. I didn't say that the bias doesn't exist. I'm saying to tie this bias to some sort of conspiracy, which is where people like Razor were taking it. People that claim that there's some sort of cover-up are claiming that. This is often where this kind of argument goes in this context. But a bias in and of itself is not necessarily conspiracy-minded.
Let me put it this way.
I had said that popularity and the warrant behind good ideas could I suppose bias a person, but also again this idea that like if a school gets more money based upon whether or not they're pumping out certain ideas, well then of course there's going to be a bias. But it's not tied to like the broader scope of like the left. That's not fair.
Right.
Well, so how do we go about showing that? Because that's what nobody's asking. How do we show that there is a bias like that?
Yeah.
Can we?
Or that there's a bias that ties to like some in-group thing, like us versus them kind of thing. That's the implication.
It depends on what you mean by bias. That's why I was very precise to explain when I explained that what I mean by bias is just a predominance of a thing.
Can I lay out?
Or we eventually got there, but that.
Can I give an example?
I feel like that was after it already.
I was saying the whole time. Yeah.
Can I give an example? I'm a teacher, right? Let's say I'm a 12th grade teacher, and I like my personal politics says I would like to teach critical race theory, right? Which part of it is like white colonizing is bad and blah 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 blah. But the school board and the government says no, you cannot teach this criteria. Now I'm in class and the student asks a question about history, and I give some answer that some proponent of CRT would give. That is what we mean when we say bias in education. It's not inherently just we're going to teach this outright. It's the teacher's political leanings are going to manifest in the classroom unless they're just like unless they're what's the word I'm looking for?
Unless they're not favorable, because I think whatever's going to be the most favorable is whatever's going to be the most fueled by money.
Which of course is wrong, right? Which of course is wrong.
Yes,
that's why we shouldn't be teaching critical race theory.
Well, that's why we should try to like not base what people learn solely upon how much money it's.
So we shouldn't have critical race theory in schools like that.
Now
I think.
I don't know about that example.
I think to say that there isn't obviously a bias, a far left bias in the educational system is short-sighted and naive. It's quite obvious there is. I mean, we've seen many examples of this.
How is it short-sighted to want a more thorough explanation?
In the curriculum itself, it's biased, and the behavior of teachers today in many of the schools that go on today have a very anti-traditionalist, very anti-Christian attitude, and then they strive very, very greatly to indoctrinate the world's children to believe the secular camp's worldview, and so the bias is quite obvious. To say that it's not obvious that there is a bias, I think is just absolutely. You have to be either a couple of things. You have to be either stupid, or you have to be naive, or you just have to be utterly uninformed. It would be.
Or you have to be willing to look for a better example, or better, a better explanation. Like, for example, if an idea has money behind it, if that idea is more popular, and what's more popular might get a school more funding, these kinds of ideas. These are cheap and outside the realm of like what should be called education. I'm just saying that like if a bias therefore exists because of popularity, that doesn't mean therefore that those like if a left seemingly left idea gets popular, right? It's because it's popular. It has nothing to do with the left itself.
Oh, that's
just some
that's
conspiracy.
nice. There's a beautiful example.
I want to get something in here really quick, please, really quick. You realize, Harlequin, the population.
Was I speaking or what?
You realize we were both starting. Was I speaking at the same time. We were both starting at the same time.
No, we're not.
Yes, we were. No, and anyway,
that's your delusion.
Anyway, I'm Harlequin.
I'll hold what you were saying. Can he just make a point real quick?
Nephilim is going to fuck this conversation so bad.
I would like to say that you realize that the population of the country is like at least close to 50-50 with right versus left, Republicans and Democrats. Whereas in the colleges and even high schools, it's not even in that ballpark.
I'm sorry, let me finish.
It's not even in the ballpark. And that shows.
I brought this up. I wouldn't say it's 50-50, but I see your point. But however, there's a certain like what's called neoliberalism, bandwagon, PCism, right? It's popular. And again, especially among younger people who don't necessarily, not to pick on younger people or anything, because it's not just young, it's just people that maybe haven't necessarily researched or taken the time to develop any nuance in their position, right?
So
because to prop them up and suggest that they represent all of
I don't know what you mean when you say
that's
it's popular.
Because what is popular is what gets reported.
Wait.
No, it's not.
Wait. I'm sorry. Before you spaz.
Or rather, not what's popular, but what gets ratings. What gets ratings? Again, we're back to money. That's I said that from the beginning.
Schools care about ratings? What do you mean by that? Can you
So somebody says there's no the bias is not clear, and it's just what's popular. Oh, that's not true. Let me give you an example. The scientific community, they determine what goes into school books. People like Kenneth Miller and other people. Now Kenneth Miller's a Catholic, I agree, but in my book, he's a secularist. So and all the school books are written by the secular camp. So. They're not written by creationists. They're not written by Christians.
Thank
they're
God.
Okay.
God for that.
So here's the point.
Yeah,
the point is that the bias is obvious in the education system in what is taught to children in science, if nothing else. But I'd say in other ways, but certainly in science. And here's a beautiful example of that bias. There's a thing in science called cortical inheritance. And what that means is that the structural design of the cell, of an organic cell, is passed on by heredity because cells split. The DNA, the information in the DNA doesn't form cells. Cells don't form from materials in an organism. That never happens. Every cell that in every organism is a result of the cell splitting, doubling the DNA molecule and splitting, and you get two. But there's no formation of a cell, right? So every cell is a clone, you might say, and then modified to specialize by cell splitting. Now that's called cortical inheritance. And the structural design of the cell contains information like.
So, can we not do this? Like, can we please?
Midway.
Nephilim is a fucking crazy person. I don't know why.
He should speak though, because this is what we have to look forward to with conspiracy-minded thinking.
I'm just curious.
All right, I'm out. Good luck with Nephilim, guys.
No, I'm just curious. Did anybody do that? Who did that?
I did. But I'll leave and you guys can bring him back up. I fucking can't stand him.
Look, and can I please ask you a yes or no question? Because it's impossible to make someone who has no position. So my question to you is yes or no, should critical race theory be taught in schools?
I'm not the person to ask. But but can you come up with another example?
Right.
Because it's like the example should be triggered.
Okay, so let me finish my point. Okay, I'll be brief. Let me finish the point. Okay, So I'll bypass all that stuff and simply say that the cortex, that is the structural design of the cell, possesses information that interacts with the machinery and everything, the internals of the cell. Okay, so but in the scientific community, you can't get one flat nickel for investigating and studying cortical inheritance. They won't pay. You won't get no grants, nothing, not a dime. You'll get money for studying almost everything else about biology, but you can't get a nickel for studying cortical inheritance. And the reason for that is if the cells of an organism are not produced by genetic information, they're only passed on by cell splitting. That means the organism that you are came from your parents' sperm and egg cell, right? And that's what you're a product of. And your parents were a product of your parents' cells. And it goes on all the way back to the original creation, to Adam and Eve. And because there is no cell development, there's only cell passing on.
No, this is perfectly on. This is fundamentalism right here.
Here's the final point.
That's what you guys are in some ways.
Gosh, help you, man. If you guys aren't afraid, allow somebody 30 seconds.
You're not on the subject.
I am on the subject.
Dude, we don't.
He was on the subject. This is the idea of conspiracy mindedness and where it takes you.
Exactly. He's not on the subject. The subject is liberal bias, and we have a clear example of it right here on the stage, Harlequin.
Yeah, but then he left.
It's you.
Oh, you're talking about liberal bias. Exactly. How am I liberally biased?
Because
I'm literally saying that biases exist, but that you can't tie them.
We can't get a straight answer out of you when we try to pry it out of you. It's obvious you have a liberal bias. If you
so you haven't demonstrated, let alone even asked me about how I'm liberally biased. I've said two things very specifically, very clearly.
You won't answer the idea that critical race theory shouldn't be taught in school.
No, that's actually your question, Swab, and I'm not trying to dodge you, dude. It's just I'm not going to stick on the subject that I'm not.
Answer Suave. Let's hear you answer Suave. Go ahead. All right, he's going to answer Suave. Go ahead, Harlequin.
I literally just said, okay, and I was actually in the midst of saying, because I already told this to Suave, that I'm not comfortable answering that question because I'm not the appropriate authority on that.
Okay, well then maybe you should stop trying to make
if I knew more about it specifically, then maybe I'd feel more comfortable talking about it. That's all. I'm not trying to dodge you. I don't know why that specific example has to matter when we're talking about a bias. You can't come up with another example?
Lil Nas is going to answer.
Because we were talking about, because you were just talking about how bases could be non-biased.
Let someone answer you.
Things certain ideas taking place in school without bias, as if you're justifying critical race theory being in schools.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Can I?
A bias exists. It's just like if an idea has more money behind it because it's more popular.
All right, guys, have a good night.
Then you can't therefore tie it to that party and that ideology. That's all I'm saying. It's bizarre. It's very simple.
I'd actually like to say something about critical race theory. Like, do you think that it's impossible within like a conservative worldview to believe in critical race theory? Like, I don't understand why you're just associating.
It's not impossible.
It's way okay. I can bring you tons
critical
of
race theory. So I'm a Republican. I think I'm just not religious. Critical race theory is based on the presupposition that that race is associated with like economic standing or something like that. You know, the hierarchy. The foundation of it is that society is divided into oppressor and oppressed classes.
Sure.
And that what's that? And that all of the society is divided into oppressed classes, and it is.
I have no fucking clue what we're talking about.
It creates a hierarchy of oppression based on like ethnicity, sex, gender. You know,
Isn't that like
they
Marxism?
pull everything into it, where they say that like, you know, a black lesbian is on like the 4th level of oppression or something. Her life is especially oppressive. When there's nothing. I mean, that's just pulled out of a hat. Like, if someone wanted to say that generally. I mean, first of all, it's a stupid way to think about society. I took a class, I think, in sociology in college. They talked about it for like 2 weeks, and I'm on the left, and I just, after class, I got the A, I regurgitated the shit they wanted me to, and I left thinking it's a stupid subject. Like, I don't understand why you're so scared of it being taught to people. I think intelligent people will just sit through it and be like, "This is fucking hysterical babble."
Yeah, but foundational.
I agree.
It's not this like fall of civilization to teach kids foundational economic standing.
Exactly. Okay.
All right, real quick.
Foundationally, you have to agree.
Yo, hold up, really quick. Nephilim, you can come back up. Just stay on topic, please.
What?
Just real quick.
Well, see, I was on topic, but I can't get 30 seconds
your religious
uninterrupted.
Stuff. It's not a religious stage.
We don't want to hear
biology.
Theism crap. My
discussion was about bias. It was about bias, which was we were talking about. You claiming that there is no leftist bias, and I was pointing that out.
I'm talking about your religious bias.
It's bias.
No, it's
leftist.
It's
leftist bias.
No,
it's your shut up. I'm not talking about religion. No. I'm talking about leftism.
No, it's not leftist.
Quiet.
No, you be quiet.
Quiet, dumbass.
Listen, I'm gonna.
So can I make my point?
First of all, I'm gonna mute you now. I'm gonna put you to the stage if you keep going.
You guys are
We're not talking about leftist bias. We're talking about theist crap, which has no validity in science whatsoever, and that's why it doesn't get funding. Okay, it has nothing to do with the politics. It has to do with the theist stuff. Does not deserve funding.
He's scared so bad his panties are soiled right now. Can I finish my assertion?
Oh no! I was
pointing out leftist bias. Leftist bias.
Can I just address something
different real quick? We don't want to hear about the religious stuff.
Can I finish my evidence of leftist bias?
It's not bias. It's a bias.
Can I point out my evidence for leftist bias?
It's not leftist bias.
It's not leftist bias. So your response, your way to shut down the argument is to claim it's not and then silence somebody.
Oh, he thinks there is. I keep him around. He makes me look less crazy.
Pain. So I understand what you mean when you say that. You say that. Yes, I think it's okay that what I'm trying to say is, if critical race theory can be taught in schools, then there should also be traditionalist conservative ideas taught in schools as well. I'm not saying it can't be in schools, but it should be equally.
I don't think we should teach either.
Well,
in fact,
it depends.
Traditional ideas.
I just want to make this.
I agree. I don't think we should teach neither. But if we're going to teach one, then we should teach the other as well. We should keep politics equal
for sociology class, if you were teaching Leo Strauss, who's like a god of conservative economics and culture, like he's really smart. He influenced a lot of people. I wouldn't have any problem with teaching his,
exactly. I think we should have equal representation of political ideologies, or either equal or none. But that's not what the conversation has been about.
I just wanted to make a statement based on my limited understanding of critical race theory, and I think Little Nas might know more about this than me, but critical race theory is founded on.
Wait, can I get wait 1 second, Frank? Can I get mute powers, please? I don't know why I don't have mute powers.
Can you
have other powers, but not mute powers? What the hell?
You just interrupted someone to ask for muting powers. That's it. Well, you're the one that should be muted.
So critical race theory.
Hey, Kevin, give me a sec. Hey, dog, aren't you a mod?
Oh, he doesn't look like he is.
Yeah, I am, but I don't have a thing on me.
I have a badge, man. What's your badge?
I don't have a badge.
Don't interrupt people to do that.
Badge boy.
This is a DM topic conversation.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. Keep going, sir.
So, from what I understand, critical race theory is founded on the presupposition that society is divided into oppressor and oppressed classes. That I don't think that should be taught to children, because you haven't established that. It's a presupposition. You haven't established that there's no evidence that society is made up of oppressor and oppressed classes, because those words mean something. And I don't think we should be teaching children that certain people are oppressors and other people are oppressed.
Hey, Kevin, doesn't that sound like Marxism, except replacing social status with race? Sounds a lot like Marxism.
Well, have you?
I don't know if that's the case. That's different.
I don't know if that's actually the case, but when you're in school, what they're doing is preparing you for higher education, right? And what gets taught in the higher education is CRT. What you're learning isn't actually CRT. It's the prep work for it.
So you're going to teach me what I'm actually learning.
You have to learn how to analyze lenses, right? because that's where the field of study is in higher education.
Right, but there should be equal representation of lenses, okay? That's the problem. There isn't an equal representation of lenses, and that's why it's producing at a normally different amount of different
as much as I agree with that, Suave, as much as I think you're correct. I mean, all kids have to do once they get out of the classroom after, someone's attempted to teach them this, all they have to do is look at the culture around them. Like, take that chick from Orange is the New Black, that like short black dyke. I can't remember her name. She's like a really popular actress. If critical race theory was true, she'd live an absolutely immiserated life. She'd be a bum, and her life would just be, a cycle of oppression where she couldn't make any money for herself, and she'd just be like, psychologically destroyed. And she's a fucking millionaire. She lives in Hollywood. She's one of the most successful actresses to come out of, series from the past. If critical race theory was true, she'd be a fucking bum, but never.
Totally understand what you mean. What? I don't know. I totally understand.
Yeah,
what he's saying is like, if kids should be able to figure this like out on their own. That this obviously isn't true just from outside the classroom. But the problem is,
I agree with that. But the example you gave was pretty.
It's really propagandizing.
That is silly. That's very, very, very naive.
Not following that.
Like kids call it.
How you couldn't.
What part of CRT is telling you that can't happen?
What can't happen?
What?
That a black person can't achieve success. What part of CRT says that?
Because they're pressed.
Well, I'm saying like a black woman who's also a lesbian who came from a certain area and grew up in some economic climate. Critical race theory would suggest that the odds are her life is going to be just a parade of oppression. Like her life is going to suck.
Would it suggest that?
Statistics tell us that statistically.
She has all of the characteristics that suggest, an association with oppression. The fact that she's attracted to the same sex, the fact that she grew up in South Central, the fact that, she's short, she's kind of butch or whatever. All of these things,
statistics tell us that to be
true. Theory suggests that she doesn't have the characteristics that would lead to some type of life of stability and freedom or whatever. But
it doesn't say that it can't happen.
She's a millionaire.
It doesn't say that people can't overcome obstacles.
Yeah, there are exceptions. You don't ignore the fact that things have been stigmatized, like homosexual couples, et cetera. Like those are things have been stigmatized. But yeah, it doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions to that. Especially if you're talking about a celebrity. I mean, people become celebrities for different reasons. Like
the fact
that they're held up as novelized, they're not
silly. But wouldn't someone feel silly saying that? The black population of the United States has it's just, walking out of this ass end of oppression and their lives suck so much. Yeah, Jaden Smith is a person. Jaden Smith is basically.
But that's not what critical race theory is even about. Critical race theory.
That's just not true. Yeah,
it's
talking about generalities. It says generally people.
Well, no, critical race theory specifically deals with legal.
Talking over me.
Well, I was interjecting because you said something stupid, right? So critical race theory deals with
stupid. I'm a quiver with anticipation.
Yeah, so critical race theory deals with how race intersects with the legal system. So they're not saying that a race is like oppressed or whatever. I mean, that's kind of a very simplified view.
You're
right?
redefining what most people consider critical race theory. I don't know what the fuck you're saying, but it doesn't.
Well, that's just
not what they mean when they teach critical race theory.
I'm just trying to read you the definition.
Don knows everything about race theory compared to us.
Can I ask Payne a question?
Well, I am a furry, so
Payne.
I would be.
Yeah. Because you know why? Because critical race theory is socially liberal, which I'm trying to get across to Harlequin.
Yeah, I agree. Payne, did you read like Bell and
so what?
D'Angelo?
That doesn't, God, liberal how? Because it attracts the bias of like people that can claim to be liberal, or because it actually has something necessarily to do with like a certain set of liberal ideology. Like you can't differentiate, so you don't have an argument.
Liberalness is overtly.
I'm trying to determine if anybody here actually knows what the fuck critical race theory is.
Yeah, I do.
That's what I've been trying to ask. Where are the screenshots of the papers that?
Hold on. Has anybody here read Bell or D'Angelo or Jaquan or anybody that actually like invented this?
A while ago.
Because if you haven't, like, I'm sorry not to sound elitist, but I mean, you'd have to kind of be familiar with that literature to know what it is.
Does critical race theory have a central literature that we can refer to?
Yes, it does.
Just go to the Stanford Encyclopedia right here.
You're not going to learn how it's implemented by Stanford Encyclopedia.
Well, who cares? We're just trying to understand what it is.
Well, that wasn't the subject of this.
So Lawson,
not
correct me.
Philosophy anyway.
So Lawson, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood that critical race theory is founded on the presupposition that society is divided between oppressed and oppressor classes.
That's like a very.
Right?
That's a very. But that's like a
So
very.
he asked me, dog. He asked me a question. Anyway, the answer is sort of like the stuff that they're teaching in some like colleges and elective classes. Yes, that is what it is. That's not
Okay,
like
so
the
if
dictionary
I
definition.
disagree with that presupposition, then I don't feel compelled to read any more literature on the subject.
Well, it's good to know who your enemies are. I will say that. So I would read some of it at least.
Wait a minute, but hold on, but that's like a very simplistic definition, right? The point is that like what critical race theory is trying to do is analyze how the intersection between racial marginalization and the legal system and like law, right? That's the gist.
Yes, that is the definition of it. That's not how it's taught or implemented in schools.
Well, the way it's taught and implemented in schools could be like a billion different ways. Like the point is, we have to stick to one thing, right?
It's taught and implemented in basically one general sense, and that's what Kevin Spacey mentioned.
That just sounds like they're teaching some kind of like, some kind of like intersectionalism, right? Intersectional. I mean, I can't really even call it intersectional feminism because it's not really. I guess like intersectional. Well, yeah, I guess I could say intersectional feminism.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be what we said while simultaneously believing that women should have equal rights. I mean, it's kind of a weird philosophy to have if you truly think that women deserve equal rights, because I think you'd end up with like kind of a jaded interpretation of where women's rights are right now. Like, and that's why you see such vitriol from people who talk about this philosophy.
I don't know. I never really seen classes in critical race theory.
No actual classes on critical race theory. It's just like.
I mean, I came from a really like multicultural, like middle class college in New York City, and the student body was like, it basically just looked like, you know, a Gap commercial, like kids from every race. And I think they teach it because, at least what I think, it teaches kids to think about race as like a crucial part of their personality and a crucial part of how they're going to organize their lives.
It's just a way for a lot of colleges to siphon money.
Dangerous.
I think it's just a way for a lot of colleges to siphon money from their students.
Oh, undoubtedly, yeah.
I mean, it's just to give the professor something to do and give the school money. Like 99% of the time, like this is what these classes are for. I mean, unless you're like a graduate student or you're pursuing like a BA in law or philosophy, you're really wasting your time.
Yeah,
I have a question.
We all think it's stupid.
I have a question. If you are a college and you want to start some curriculum, right? How are you going to be able to tell if that curriculum is like useful, helpful, works, has merit, anything like that outside of the arts?
It's called looking at statistics. You look at statistics. You see what skills employers need. You see what you can ask other college professors or other college faculty or even your own college faculty what kind of skills they need or they expect their students to hone. I mean, there are like plenty of. I mean, you can even partner with other colleges and other. I mean, there are like plenty of things you can do. I mean, the list goes on, right?
Do you think that this is like being done?
Yeah. I mean, for some of the classes, yeah, but not for classes like the ones we're talking about. No, I think most of them are just a waste. Most of them are just a way of getting
into STEM has worked. Sorry, Doc.
Yeah, most of them are just a way for just like adding classes to person's schedule while siphoning money out of them and giving the teachers something to do. Given the, because if you have like a professor in your college that does research, if you have a professor in your college that does research, you kind of want money, right? You're paying them, you want money back, so you create all these bullshit classes to like siphon money from students. I mean, either that or the people who come up with this are just delusional. I probably a little bit of both, to be honest. Probably a little bit of both.
And I've said this before. I think it's interesting that we're talking about critical race theory and a debate subject about being either left or right, because in recent philosophical history, people have associated critical race theory with leftism, probably rightly so, because most of the people who adhere to it or who have heard about it associate it with the left. But I don't see any reason why someone couldn't be, conservative, traditional, wanting low taxes, believe in God. I mean, you could believe in critical race theory and be a Republican.
I'm sure there are some people that are like that way too, and on the other way as well. But I don't think that's the majority. Do you?
Yeah.
That the majority of Republicans believe in internalized racism, intra-racism, and whatever institutional racism. I'm guessing if there was a poll on that, most Republicans, by a far, would not say that that's what they identify as believing.
Yeah, in terms of the most majority view, yeah, I'd agree. I just thought it was interesting, just in point of fact, people bring it up as representing the left when it doesn't necessarily have to. You can be.
Which is why I don't know why that example is. I guess. I mean, that example just perpetuated on, and I feel like it's such a trigger. Or not even triggering, but just that it either gets completely written off altogether, or it triggers people. I feel like, and it's like there have to be other examples. Surely, if there's such a bias, there have to be even better examples. Which again, if it's okay, so the bias exists, but it's like Dog was saying, it's about getting money for these schools. It's not because it's connected to other, ideology of that same side of the of the political spectrum.
Well, some of
it's easy to shoot from the hip and just assume that it does, but that's not clear thinking.
Well, some of the ideas that come out of critical race theory, I don't think Republicans would subscribe to in the general. Ideas again, oppressor oppressed classes, whiteness. What's the other one? Sorry about that. I can't think of just drew a blank. Sorry, but yeah, whiteness and systemic racism, things like that. I don't think that Republicans. One of the things that I ascribe to Republicans is this strong belief in personal responsibility. And I don't know if there's a direct contradiction there, but the idea that there are circumstances governing your life beyond your control. I don't think.
Are we talking about CRT in higher education or primary and secondary education? Because I feel like we've lost track.
Both. It started as higher education, and then we talked about elementary school.
Things like institutionalized racism and internalized racism are still taught at the high school level. If you look in the chat, I posted the picture of critical race theory in my binder.
Main stage chat.
Highlights those. Main stage chat.
I mean, the fact that we aren't teaching kids basic moral philosophy in 5th grade, deontology versus consequentialism. The fact that we aren't teaching kids that, but we're teaching them critical race theory, age depending, obviously, That's fucking enraging. I thought the people should have been taught.
You know, we should just, you know, teach them philosophy.
Did he say something? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah, would you say, Darth?
Yeah, kind of. Can you repeat that, Darth?
It was a joke.
Was it a funny joke?
It was a joke about teaching kids about Bill Grommy.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm sorry. Who was just talking about how like the right sort of identifies with personal responsibility?
That was Kane.
No, I think it was Dog.
No, that was me.
That was Kevin.
Kevin. Yeah,
it was. I wanted to speak on
Kevin Spacey.
Because like for a while until very, very recently, I kind of thought of myself as conservative, but I've kind of come to realize that it's not conservatism that I relate to. It's the working class and like the sort of bootstrap mentality.
Mm. Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat. I'm not religious. I think traditional conservatives would probably reject me. So I don't know. I just call myself conservative because I know I'm not a Democrat. I know I'm not a leftist.
You probably mean you're socially conservative.
I mean, I just sleep easy knowing that there are parts of left philosophy that are true and parts of right philosophy that are true. Like, I mean, it's difficult when you really, or at least when I think about it, to be like, oh, I'm on that side, when there's parts of the beliefs from both sides of the political spectrum that are clearly useful and correct and good for society. So staying on...
Yeah, it's like Strong would keep going on about individuals like not trying to generalize so broadly, and it's like I feel like the same has to be applied and certainly can be applied. Like, I mean, yeah, obviously, like, but again, the biases then are like because it's like familial often, like, or they're familiar beliefs because they're often familial beliefs, and they're how we're raised, and then you go to college and you break from that. And yeah, I mean, this idea that a bias against, it's so conspiracy minded. And when Neff literally comes in here and he's essentially, he's asserting the same kind of bias, and he goes further and he ties it to like, because there's a cover up and because they're in allegiance with the Dark One. And it's
please don't lump me in with Neff. God, please don't.
No, of course not. Of course not. It's just like, no.
If we're gonna entertain the Neff conversation, I would say that institutions of learning are biased towards science and not pseudoscience.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, Lawson, you're an atheist, right?
Yeah.
Oh, then you're just as rare as Strong atheist.
Oh, yeah.
Because you guys are both, like presumably most atheists have a proclivity to be leftists.
Yeah.
I'm an atheist.
That's why I can't watch the ACA anymore. I used to love that show like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, and then what happened? And then what changed?
Now it's the transgender atheist community of Austin.
It used to be a popular show. It was on radio. It was on public broadcasting, and then it became popular. And look what happened. You know, it lost its integrity. It has nothing to do with because they're liberally inclined. It's because like even the shittiest of shitty liberals have then attached themselves to it.
Let Doc talk.
Matt Doahanty has always been a woman. So
It's just going to be the case.
What happened is they started the new atheist movement, which injected a lot of political biases into what was strictly atheism, and they lost a lot of the people that disagree with them on the political biases. That's what happened.
Yeah. Well, I think it just like, I mean, like how often can you do? I feel like you, in terms of like the culture and the society, the battle of just strict atheism was won. So obviously you had more progressive, like you just had progressives attach themselves to it. That was a corner that was fighting.
Yeah, that's like, Obviously, I think that's totally reasonable.
You acknowledge the fact that fighting like Christian fundamentalists, in terms of saying, "Oh, Christian fundamentalists are wrong," you're you simultaneously align yourself, like the LGBT community, things like that.
I don't know about that. Maybe in the
you just will. You'll end up lining up on the same side as them.
So not believing in
you'll
God
be thrown into that category often by people that are generalizing you, and then that might be the material that you end up being exposed to. You're talking about people that are in a cult being like liberated from a cult, and you don't think they're going to keep pushing against all other conventions? Of course they are, but that doesn't mean that that's like, again, like a liberal thing. It's just a freedom thing and like a running from a trauma thing. I mean, that's what the ACA was. Man. That's what the atheist experience was. People were calling in and like...
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. I'm just ranting at this point. Actually, I've been ranting for like the last hour, so that's fine.
I want Nephilim back. Touched on what I was going to bring up next, and that's the left has made freedom as like this meme. Like it's the most precious thing mankind has ever achieved, and it's like a meme now to a lot of the left.
Have done that for decades, though. That was like a big Reagan thing. Like freedom is like the central political focus of like.
Yeah, like why are we better than other places? Because we're free. Yeah, exactly.
The thing that really grates against me, and this is actually related to the ACA thing too, is how the thing that grates against me about leftists and leftism is how self-assured and pretentious they are on all of their positions, and how unwilling they are to discuss their positions with people of opposing views. The ACA did it. I remember when they started the new atheism movement, and any voice of opposition or statement to the contrary was like shut down and dismissed in like a very like nasty way. And I find that with like a lot of like people on the left, like on any of the topics du jour, like transgenderism or systemic racism, like all the stuff, right? Like the unwillingness to discuss the topics in good faith, the pretentiousness and self-assuredness. It's just annoying, I guess. I don't know.
It's like
they labeled their party the progressive.
Like it's like all of these like things, like whatever the fat pride movement and stuff like that. And like this ridiculous shit. Like it's just whoever has the most problems and whoever can be more marginalized wins. Like it's always like all of these new things that are just certain subsects that just leave like people in.
It might be more recent in your mind, but there have been people that have been struggling with these things for many years. Like if you're looking at someone like take just any random gay person has, well, actually that's not a good example. I'll just say that like there's been a lot of disparaging of homosexuals for a long time, right? We can't just pretend that didn't happen, that wasn't a thing. I mean, it's not that we need to find someone to blame. It's just an acknowledgement that like they haven't always had, an equal say, that there's been, I mean, more than hate, there's been hate crimes. That's a thing. Like I don't.
Yeah,
but it kind of is happening.
It's not a new thing. It's again like our society is not the oldest society. Like if I'm talking about like America, for example, I don't want to keep assuming other people are Americans. It's just, but it stands to reason for all nations that like there was another country or another nation before you. It's this constant exchange of real estate. There are countries that have had these ideas present before. It's just that there's been so much pushback against those ideas that
maybe like if we had like this idea where we could all unite and like it wouldn't be perfect, but like we could all try and strive towards freedom and equity for all, and we had like a flag that could represent that too, like maybe one with like 50 stars and like red and white stripes instead of needing a bunch of different flags that all represent the same thing, freedom and justice. Like we could just have one that's like freedom and justice for all, because that's what we're striving towards. And so
I think represent an entire country, sure, but like, is it just a country and that's it? I mean, there's different there are many different positions and ideas to represent within that country. I don't know what your point is. Like,
well, how is the idea that LGBT
like going to deify a flag, like
and equal not represented in the American flag? Is that not represented?
In practice, it
fuck
probably
the American
doesn't
flag. I'm talking about inalienable rights like freedoms and
exactly.
equality and democracy.
What the American flag stands for.
Well, ideally, but is it? I mean, that's sort of what we're talking about. That's the ideal.
The argument is that doesn't actually happen in America.
Okay, and so putting out a flag is going to change that?
Stop trying to just beat me over the head with the flag. I mean, like,
no, but
we should all be able to
something like gay marriage. Take something like gay marriage. So gay marriage is now largely a thing that Democrats and Republicans are both okay with. There was a time where there was a time where, at least I remember, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton being against gay marriage, and then they came around, and lots of Republicans because of their religious beliefs being against gay marriage, and then most I would say most Republicans are fine with gay marriage now. Maybe they might not be for it, but
Mitt Romney did the same thing. So did Donald Trump. They flip flopped.
Well, after it became legal,
I remember that with Hillary in '92.
So the point that I was just going to try to make was that I think I guess the short version is I see a lot of people on the left demanding that people on the right change overnight, change their beliefs, accommodate, the left's causes, and they want it yesterday. And I don't think that that's realistic. But I think marriage,
but to be fair, when it comes to stuff like, hey, you've been like disparaging and treating me as though I'm inhuman, in those instances, there's like an expediency or urgency to wanting to, kind of like rectify that situation, right? But like not with respect to all like changing all of your beliefs, because that just doesn't happen anyway. Like nobody changes their entire worldview overnight. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like your characterization is just kind of out there.
I think what people were really going for, not to say you have to change your beliefs, but like, please just don't legislate against, their freedoms.
Hell yeah.
I think we're witnessing an overcorrection in the social pendulum is what's happening, and we will
sure.
See it,
that's so smart. Yeah.
The only way for change to really, really be effective is if it's small changes over long periods of time.
That's what conservatism is, baby.
Or if you think about,
or it's stagnation.
No, I already trapped you, Payne.
Or regression.
Well, I have maybe an interesting response. That is the conservative view, at least in some circles. But that's what's so brilliant about the United States, where republicanism and liberalism are kind of perpetually in this nonviolent civil war for legislation, and that's what allows the really, really slow changes that everyone agrees on, or whenever someone does.
That was beautiful.
Yeah,
that's not an American thing. It's just the democracy thing. That's the way the system's been designed.
Yeah, but we perfected it, Will.
Yeah, come on, man.
I'm just kidding.
It was beautiful.
I don't know about that.
I would like to point out one last thing. And that's, we never would have gotten here if we'd have left Nephilim in here to rant about his bullshit.
We would have been talking about biology, trying to confirm whatever the fuck he was talking about.
He let out a nice whistle early on. Did you guys catch that? That was like, whoo, my eardrums. But yeah, I mean, like, I was fine with him here, but I mean, it's obvious where he's going to go, and he's going to take the conspiracy specifically into the realm of evolutionary biology, and like.
I was just worried that was gonna go into like a theist atheist rant, and like, I mean, I love discussing that, but today is not the day for that. Like, I don't know.
But do you see what Neff's doing? I feel like is he's saying, okay, this is my like assumption of reality. And so then he's shooting from the hip, identifying, what he then perceives to be the bias that comports with his doomsday narrative,
No, but some of that bias is legitimate.
Yeah.
Well, because biases exist, but the question is, how do we explain them? That's the question.
I don't think. Listen,
you can always.
I don't think like fundamentalists. They're the 6,000 years old should be taught in class, and of course everyone here agrees with that. But like even from a Christian standpoint, I think like things like evolution should be taught. But like, people should prioritize that these are theories. Like a lot of times in society, we take theories as granted. And yes, I know theories are often supported by facts, and they can be taken sometimes very legitimately, like gravity, which like I'm pretty sure everyone here believes exists, but of course like you can't directly see it, but you can see its effects. Like we have to understand that these are theories, and like even if they are true, I think it does every child better to like be more skeptical on science, because that's what science is all about, being skeptical about things and just understanding that these are theories, and like there are flaws with evolutionary theory. I'm not saying it's not true, but it'd be ridiculous if anyone said they were flaws, and I think pointing out those flaws help kids develop their own opinions and beliefs more truly. Atheist or theist.
What flaws do you see, Slav?
Yeah, we know nothing for sure.
I see flaws with.
I think there's a practical problem in terms of like you only have so many hours in the year to teach stuff, right? So you have to pick a curriculum. You have to cover a certain thing.
Well, just saying like, oh, here's evolution, and here's some often contentiously debated things about evolution. Like, of course, you could say evolution's a process, but like the theory of this, how happened, this is what is primarily believed, but here are some contentions with it.
Contended by who?
That's, creationists get off on like conflating, macro and micro evolution. So, in school you learn about evolution in general, and then they like point to, and here's the theory of evolution of how everything began. But that's not, I don't recall like a whole semester on that. Like you learn about the evolution of plants and animals. You learn about evolution in general, and then they point to the theory of evolution, and I guess I'm trying to say it's like a small part of the whole. But creationists like to conflate and make it seem as if schools are they're teaching you about the theory of evolution in some big way, I guess.
I don't think it's as secular as Nephilim makes it out to be, but I definitely think promoting contentions about it, and
let's not forget what primary school is for. Its purpose. It's just meant to prepare young people to become old people.
If they're
to be productive members in the particular society in which they're being raised, and so that's what the curriculum is supposed to be about. Which is why I can't see how. I'm not trying to bring it back to CRT, but I can't see how that helps shape productive members of society. But whatever.
Yeah.
That's the side.
If they're going to present contentions to evolution, those contentions need to be something credible. There needs to be reason behind it. You can't just have, well, these people don't buy the science behind it. Yeah. They don't really think it's science, but here's their contention. It would be like if they had to present, if they were somehow obligated to present flat eartherism to students when they're talking about the shape of the earth.
Yeah, that's what they say. They say, teach the controversy. That's their line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody know if there's a flat Earth science journal yet? You know how the creationists made their own science journals?
Well, I'm infiltrating a flat Earth Discord. I'm infiltrating a flat Earth Discord. I'm getting in there, dude. I'm gonna try and get a valued member role in mods on a flat Earth Discord.
You're gonna be a flat earther next year.
They tried to tell me that things go downwards at Earth because of density. It was pretty funny.
Downwards.
Density and buoyancy,
things go down.
So I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. Makes so much sense that 3 grams per cubic centimeter makes things go down. That's definitely a force. And they were like, wait a minute. No. It was so fun.
It's all electromagnetism and refraction.
They're like, well, the curvature. I asked them what the curvature of the Earth was, and they said 8 inches per mile squared.
Oh, have you looked? I'm looking at that picture that you posted of your lesson plan.
Oh.
Have you? To me, it does. Nothing there seems like abominable, and they are phrasing it as this is the theory, and these are the major beliefs of the position.
There's nothing in there that's contentious. I would say there's some things in there that are extremely one way and not the other.
But they're not
racism and stuff like that.
They're not teaching it to you in a way that it's saying, "Oh, the society is institutionally racist."
Oh, but when we formulate, we formulate their opinions, they're asking us to take that into account. They're like, "How does this relate to institutional racism?" As if that's something that is true.
In the theory, you're learning about the theories.
It's an interpretation of reality rather than a statement of truth about reality. It's like, and that's what we were talking about before. It's important to be like, to have the, intellectual hardware to be able to see through bullshit that, like, I think some people get taught it. They say,
but kids aren't good at that. That's my thing, is kids aren't good at that.
I'd agree with that.
Their propaganda is really easy.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Nothing in that screenshot is actually telling students this is what's real. It's just saying, hey, there's this thing called critical race theory. This is kind of what it is.
But as I explained,
I would agree that kids are super impressionable, and that's something to note.
I have a question.
When we do our analysis of books, when we use these theories, we're literally like asked, how does this correlate with institutional racism, as if that is something that is actually valid. And even if it's just subjected as something completely subjective in theory, if it's just completely subjective, why aren't they teaching also like traditional things that don't include that and actually focused on more traditionalist values?
We get Donna's question in.
As I was going to ask, in which level is critical race theory being taught in schools? Because I'm not sure critical race theory is being taught in middle school or something like that.
It is being taught in high school.
How old are you? What level of education are you?
I'm 16 too, and I have never been taught critical race theory.
Okay, that's completely...
Because as far as I know, critical race theory... can I continue, or do you want to continue?
Go ahead, you're good.
Go ahead.
Okay, as I was saying, as far as I know, critical race theory is an academic study at an undergraduate and graduate level that is about explaining systemic racism in America, is it not? So I do not think.
Yeah, it could be, but it's taking these things like systemic racism as assumed as true.
Yeah, I
that's what we have to take.
But wait, hold on. Why would you say systemic racism isn't real in America?
Why would I not?
Let's try to play. No, like give me. No, like do not ask me a question. You explain because you made the point.
No, if you have the belief that America is under systemic racism, you need to prove that.
The thing is, I never mentioned whether I had that belief or not. I just told you to explain to me why it doesn't exist. Because you believe it doesn't exist, no?
Okay, because there are no laws that are specifically oppressing Black people, so that they're being oppressed in this world. I can give you laws like affirmative action that are supporting African Americans over whites, which is an example.
It's not over.
Wait, no,
they're allocating specific resources just for those minorities.
That still doesn't mean it's over. It means you're correcting a deficit, so to speak. So it's not about giving them more. It's about trying to fix what was currently at the time a disparity or a deficit.
For me,
historically, not currently in the system.
So for me, the way I see systemic racism in any country, whether it's America, Canada, whatever, any country that mistreated any group of people before, I see that it's a direct consequence of historical actions that were taken in said country. And I think history has consequences. History has consequences. If you will enslave a group of people and you mistreat them for hundreds of years, that group of people are going to be under a special circumstance, and it is systemic racism. Do you think just because
historically the United States was systemically racist, but it isn't?
Wait, hold on. I have a question though. Let's say
that it was historically systemic. It's that something happened in history that would lend itself to being systemic now. like a sort of residue that's left after the fact.
Yes.
So,
missed the point completely, Suave. Missed the point completely.
I can tie this back to a historical event that I know. The indigenous people in Canada, for example, were mistreated severely, and look at where they are now. Their kids were taken away from them, and they were put into residential schools. And now you can see how that affected the indigenous people today, with the skyrocketing suicide rates and the poverty rates. Why can't you say the same thing for African Americans?
I'll explain to you right now, because systemic racism, defined or also called structural racism or institutional racism, is a term that refers to a form of racism that is embedded in laws and regulations of a society. Just because something historically happened where it was racist does not mean that those laws are embedded in society today.
My argument
arguments to the contrary, though.
My argument is, if the schooling system of America was racist for a long time and there was segregation and all of these things, that would affect today the schooling system in America today.
Right, but that does not refer to institutionalized racism, which says that there are laws embedded today that are racist.
What do you think embedded means? I mean, that's something we can talk about.
Racism does not equal
I'm not going to necessarily scream it to you.
Of course, America is suffering the consequences of it being previously racist.
That's my problem with this terminology, systemic racism or systems of oppression.
You're not being honest with the
because
I think I could actually clear up the disagreement here.
Hold on.
Disagreement.
Systemic racism does not equal a law saying black people are under white people.
Oh, really? Okay. Show me the definition for that. Show me where you found that definition, because I can show you the definition right now where I got mine.
What do you mean?
Well,
that would be nonsensical.
Forget about the terms for a second.
The system in itself does not need a law to directly support it. You can have minor laws that indirectly support it. And a great example of this would be America's laws on drugs.
Forget about the particular. I understand what both of you are saying. I understand Dana or Donna's. I understand Dana. I understand what Dana is saying, and you're both missing each other. So. I understand what Suave is saying, because I understand that is the common usage of systemic racism. I understand what Dana's saying too, meaning that what I understand that she's saying is, if past racist events occurred, then they influence current events and governance.
Even beyond that, the society was intentionally racist back then. There was an explicit intention to treat people differently based on their race.
Now, see, here's my problem. Here's my problem with the problem with the idea as a whole. So, the idea of these systemic systems as a whole, whether it's systemic racism or systemic oppression, when you understand it the way that Dana is explaining it, all you're saying is things happen in the past that are influencing the present. And if you accept that as true, then what you have is an infinite regress of systems influencing systems. So racism was created by a system that was created by a system that was created by a system. And all you're talking about is history at that point. So it just feels moot.
Can I ask you that two wrongs don't make a right? Two wrongs do not make a right.
We're not.
For me, continue. You can speak.
I'm also trying to say is that, of course, the system was completely systematically institutionalized racist back then. But now to make innocent, non-racist people pay for the reparations of what things that they did not do is also wrong. We should not have two wrongs making a right.
What are you paying?
Wait, hold on. Didn't America pay reparations to the Asian Americans? And even slave owners? Where did you get the money for that? Because I'm pretty sure slave owners got reparations for losing their slaves. Did they not? Why didn't America do the same thing for African Americans? And why are they so poor compared to their?
If you're just going to ask me a bunch of different questions, I can't answer all of those.
Some people would argue that black people got reparations over years in the form of programs. Now, I think that that's a shitty argument, but it is an argument.
That is a shitty argument. That is a shitty argument. I'm glad you recognized that before you said it.
I love that you laughed as you said it too, like you knew it was so shitty.
No, but if we're just gonna go back and talk about reparations, then my mother's Jewish. People have been historically treated because white people are paying taxpayer dollars to pay for resources that go specifically only to minority groups.
Wait,
that is a fact.
In America, is there a specific tax money that only white people pay? I didn't know that. Wow.
No, but if there's gonna be if there's gonna be general taxpayer dollars that go specifically for only a certain group of people, minority people, that's still gonna include reparations from a majority group, or that's gonna include tax dollars from a majority group.
Oh my god! What if your tax money also goes to help other people like the poor? What are we going to do? We have to stop the poor.
Oh my goodness.
The poor.
As someone who lives in New York and has
so for me, like I said, the way I see systemic racism, right, is you have past history, you have past history of a country, and in this case, America is racism. That racism would influence those racist systems would influence today's systems. And if we recognize that history was racist, then we have to recognize that because history has direct consequences of the modern day, then that modern consequence would be racism, because America's history is racism.
I'm going to try and cut some common ground here.
I would.
Can I cut some common ground here? This is what I'm.
Can you let me finish? Can you let me finish? So I kind of want to ask. I kind of want to ask, why do you think in this one particular case of racism that history doesn't have consequences? Because that's practically what systemic racism is. The systems were racist, and now they still have racism. That's literally what it is.
Systems still have racism. Okay.
Yeah.
Two things. First of all, when you talked about it, you said what I think systemic racism is. Again, I provided a definition of what systemic racism is, and you still haven't been able to refute that. Secondly, I agree. America still has social struggles that have occurred because of original slavery things. Originally, things occurring to things like slavery, people being forced off their land. I definitely think those issues need to be fixed. I still think that's a problem, but those are not institutionalized racism as it is defined. Just
okay,
because
why
are you hung up on arguing these two different definitions of systemic racism? It just seems like you're going to continue.
Actually, they're not two different definitions of racism. What I argued is, no, they're not. It's just that you are not opening your mind. What I'm arguing is a system was racist, and now it has racism embedded in it. That's what you said, right? What does embed mean?
Yeah, I think that logic is flawed. I don't think
the whole system is racist.
All right,
I don't think that logic follows. We before we established the societies that we have today, we lived in tribes, and tribes had practices like beheading people, and that was a history that influenced futures. And it doesn't mean that because we came from let me finish. It doesn't let me finish, please. Let me finish, please.
Finish.
I am as soon as you stop talking. It doesn't mean that because we come from tribes that beheaded people that we live in a systemically beheading culture today, right? That's why the logic doesn't follow.
So tribal, like people being tribal is natural, but people being racist is not natural.
Well, that's a bad
argument. Arguing for exceptions to the rule.
And by the way, like,
all you're doing now is arguing for exceptions to the rule.
What?
All you're doing now is arguing for exceptions to the rule. We don't live in a systemically.
There's a huge difference between a tribe having this beheading culture and a country systemically oppressing a group for hundreds of years. I don't understand where this even compares.
Wasn't that long
ago?
May I ask a question?
Where is race?
The idea that it comes from some tribe is so baseless. It's irrelevant because that could happen now. It comes from hate. It comes from
do you understand the logic?
Dominating someone else.
Do you understand the logic that I just laid out for you? Jesus Christ. Do you understand the logic that I just laid out for you?
It doesn't follow. It has nothing to do with what some ancient tribe did.
Okay.
If we could do that now, if society just collapsed enough, that we could return to that at some point.
That has nothing to do with the example that I laid out.
It's not to do with our past.
Repeat your example again. Oh my God. Repeat your example again. Wait, what's the question?
If what we're saying,
guys, please, I've been really patient. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the United States ended slavery. It took action to rectify its intentionally racist positions. Okay, and then say 150 years passes, and some legislation in the country passes that says, if you get arrested 3 times, you get a mandatory 10 to 15 years in prison. And for whatever reason, that legislation affects the Black community more than any other community. Something like 75% of the people who get arrested after 3 arrests are Black. Is that litigation that made that arrest program, is that racist?
You need more information.
Are you asking me?
More information will be provided.
No, and I can explain to you
Dana,
why.
I was asking you because
based on that alone, no. But I would want more information.
I was just trying to point out the difference between like legislation that is intentionally racist and legislation that has a consequence that disproportionately affects a race. One is obviously awful, but I mean they're both awful in a way. But because that's what I think
neither of them
Dana
are.
And what's his name are having. It's the distinction between those two, racism and quote unquote systemic racism or something.
It's not systemic racism.
Like what is intentional? Yeah.
And I don't know why
you apply that
same 3 arrests to. It just seems like that would be a standard in practice that they just implemented because they wanted less criminals on the street, and for whatever reason, it disproportionately affects one demographic. Like I don't think they were.
There you go.
Why
you apply that same scenario to a place like India, where it's mostly homogenous and it's just different castes, and you don't get systemic racism, right? You get an outcome where a particular demographic is affected more than another, but it's not racism, right? There's no intentionality behind. There's no racist intent
India has their own issues with religion and whatever. And caste systems, they have their own issues. But in this particular case, we're talking about America, are we not? And someone was asking a question. Were they asking
We're
me?
using India as an analogy to see if it logically follows that it's racism. We're not talking specifically about India. You gotta follow the logic, right?
So we're using India as an example for systemic racism or something? Then I don't. India doesn't. The Indian is homogenous. It doesn't have different races.
That was the whole point in using India.
We can use India. Let's use India. Let's use India. Let's go ahead and use India. Right? We can say that.
I just did.
Right, yeah.
I said if you apply the same context to India, you get the outcome that one demographic is going to be disproportionately affected. What you don't get is systemic racism.
But
you don't get systemic racism because India doesn't have different races.